What in the heck is emotional fitness? Today you're going to find out through my good friend Janice Taylor, founder of Wilson 4Q and the Athlete Optimization Collective. She's been spending a lifetime helping executives, athletes, entertainers figure out their emotional fitness.
When these athletes are growing up, they have conditioned themselves to attach a feeling to an outcome outside of themselves. I'm good at hockey, therefore this feeling of joy that I have and performance that I have, I'm going to give this feeling to the sport itself, or the winning, or the accolades, or the fame, or the money. And they've attached it to something outside of the self and said, this is the reason why I have this identity. What we do in emotional fitness is we reverse model that. Emotional fitness is not mental health. Emotional fitness is essentially your inner radar for everything in your life you want to be able to do. Now, here is the problem.
Welcome back to the Pivot Period, the podcast that explores career transitions, reinvention, and moments that redefine who we are. We're blown away by how many people have already joined into the Pivot Period family. All the likes and subscriptions are pouring in, and we're just absolutely thrilled for that. You should do the same, like and subscribe, because you're going to be able to see amazing people like our next guest, Janice Taylor, who is joining us today. Janice, my longtime friend, how are you?
Huh. I'm so good, Pete, and I'm so proud of you and excited for you. This is awesome.
Right? We're on so many meetings and Zooms together, Janice, and I've often been told I have a face for radio, so we're trying to buck that trend and do a little bit of podcasting, which crosses over into all sorts of mediums. But how? Tell us, Janice. Just give everybody, our subscribers, and
Okay, well,
everybody
first of all, I think you have a voice for radio. Is that not amazing? Your voice?
Maybe, yeah, that's okay. I'll take it. Just give everybody your background, and we'll dive into a little bit about why this is so important for me to have you. As you're in the two hole, and we had Major League Baseball's Curtis Granderson, who is a leadoff hitter. He's known for starting off baseball games. You are familiar with as a huge Detroit Tiger fan. We'll get into. But you're in the two hole behind Curtis Granderson. So, but give us your background. Wow. Tell us how you landed where you are.
Well, first of all, I have to tell your audience that Pete gave me my first contract ever in sports 12 years ago. 12. Can you believe it's been 12 years, Pete? So Pete gave me my first contract ever in sports, and you actually started my startup career because of you. So I have to just say, like, I'm so proud of you, and I'm so grateful to be here.
You're doing the podcast, so now we're even.
Now I'm doing the podcast, but it's been 12 years. So I am in the tech industry, for those that may not know. I am 17 years in tech startups, but I started to write a theory 30 years ago. I'm going to date myself. In the 90s, which was really looking at, like, do we have another way to look at what happens to us as human beings that is not mental health? It's not that I didn't think mental health was important, but we have all these other symptoms, and I wanted them to have another framework to live in, another way for us to examine them. And growing up, I was a softball player. As you know, I love baseball more than life itself. I did a lot of homework with a lot of hockey players growing up, that I was their go-to algebra tutor, and I wrote a lot of papers for Lord of the Flies. I'm going to date myself with that one. But I also would end up hearing and talking to athletes. And I was always sort of fascinated around the journey of an athlete, but then also just us as humans. And so I wrote my own theory, launched a tech company. The first one I launched, you gave me my start. I literally think that Chicago and I should be best friends because I first was in, like, as a Canadian. First of all, I think people from Chicago are so much like Canada. But when I first went to Chicago was for Oprah. Then I came back second time to work with you. So I'm looking for my third time of why I'm going to come back to Chicago the third time, because for whatever reason, Chicago and I have a love affair.
It's going to be an
So
in studio guest for your next appearance for the pivot period.
oh,
That's
that
what
would
we're.
be so
Yeah,
good.
right.
That's what it's going to be, because I love Chicago. I don't know if Chicagoans, do you say that?
Chicagoans,
Really know
Chicagoans. Yes,
Chicagoans are so much like
they
Canadians.
are. Yeah, and I'm originally
They
from
are.
Buffalo, New York. I'm literally grew up on the border, so I'm like 45% Canadian.
I would
something
say
like that.
like
Whatever the exchange
Buffalo,
rate is.
Detroit, and
Yeah,
Chicago. Like, are those three places not really, really Canadian in
they're
so
at
many
heart. I
ways?
think they are, and they drink a lot of
At
Canadian
heart.
beer. I'm pretty sure. This has become a passion project of mine because of the numbers of players that I work with, that I have helped, that I've seen land in different areas. And then for my own story, I had 18 years in a position that I thought I was going to be in forever. But there isn't such thing as forever. And what are we going to do next? And how do we find ourselves when we're in a situation where that transition is upon us? Who do we reach out to? What is our network? Who helps us? How do we help ourselves? This is what the pivot period is all about. Part of my pivot period and part of my transition has landed me as co-founder of Nylent.org. And Nylent is an education platform for student athletes that covers financial literacy, mental health and wellness, career transition, marketing, and branding. All of those pillars are crucial to pivot to the next phase of your career. Janice, your career has kind of been at really diabolical points, really. If you look at it, between tech and now AI
Yeah.
and psychology and
Mhm.
like all these different
Yeah.
things, uh, how did you land there? I mean, you kind of surface told us, but what really drove you to this point of trying to figure this stuff out? And as we'll get into more along the line for
Yeah.
athletes, right?
Yeah. I think so. I think one of the things that I'll tell you this story in 2009, um, there was the emergence of Facebook where I
Yeah.
lived in Saskatchewan, Canada. And everyone was like, hey, isn't this great? Facebook's so awesome. We can talk to everyone from high school. And I had wrote my theory on emotional pain, the science of emotional pain at that point, which really emotional pain is we torture ourselves with the past or we torture ourselves with the future. We don't stop examining the past mistakes, the things we could have done differently, our trauma.
Mm.
We torture ourselves with the past, or we look to the future and we don't think the future is possible for us. So that's like, in a nutshell, what the science of emotional pain was. I wanted to examine that and give it different context, language, framework, meaning, everything. So when Facebook was emerging from a social media technical perspective, I said, great, we're going to torture ourselves with the past, or we're going to examine the future we're not living, because we're going to look at everybody's lives and go, I'm not having that
Right.
life. I don't have that house. I don't have that car. Or I'm going to be reminded of all of the things of the past, high school, et cetera, and I'm going to be tortured by the past. So when everyone was super excited about Facebook, I was like, oh my God, this is heroin. Like, we are going to lose our damn minds. So I was working in the pharmaceutical industry. I'd spent 10 years sitting in doctors' offices, really writing another portion of my theory. And I said, I have to quit. I have to go into technology, because my
Yeah.
immediate thought was, what's going to happen to kids? And as you know, I pitched you.
Right.
You were the first I really pitched in sports that said, sports can do so much, but we can't have kids living in traditional technology in order to engage with sports. It will mess them up. They're too young for that environment. And I said, it's not even good for us as adults. What will it do to young people? Now, when we met was 2014. Everybody was like, oh, this is great. Smartphones,
Right.
Instagram, this
Right.
is awesome. And I was like, no, 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 no. I was like this raging mom going like, this is messing up kids. So I saw technology as the fuel that could hurt emotional pain further, as well as I also saw technology as a way, if it was tooled properly and built properly, could help. And so I quit my job. I wrote Oprah, went to Silicon Valley, and was in the belly of the beast living in Silicon Valley, looking at technologies. And one side of it was like from a psychology perspective saying, well, this will mess people up. This is dangerous. And the other side was like, well, if we built it like this, it could be useful. And AI right now is kind of like that. It's either like, oh, this is going to be used here and mess people up, or it can be used here and could be useful. And
Yeah.
that's kind of what I've started to do. And I'm 17 years now in the tech industry looking at tech problems and tech
Yeah,
solutions kind of at the same
and just
time.
to add some context in, so at the Blackhawks at that time, we were looking, we were adding, because we were winning and we had new fans everywhere. We had these young kids that had their parents barely ever followed the Blackhawks. We had this just boom of basically 5, 6, 7, 8 year olds who have grown up with winning and championship hockey. And I looked at my team and said, we can't do the same old kids club. Like we can't do
No.
what we have always done, where you wait in the mail for a growth chart or something like that, a photo in the mail or a card. Kids are on their phones all the time.
Yeah.
And then we got connected, and you were exactly working on some of the things that we had talked about, like Club Penguin and these
Yeah.
games that
Yeah.
were rewarding kids. And the further you went,
Yeah.
you got tokens and all these different things. And we're like, that's where we got to get to. So I
Mhm.
do all this context and reframe this, because the pivot period is obviously about career transition. And where do we have to get to for athletes, executives, to kind of figure
Oh,
out like where tech can help them in this process, Janice? You know what I'm saying?
oh
So
my gosh.
how
Yeah.
and the first step is really like, everybody struggles with this. What are some of the
Yeah.
basic things we can start to talk about now? That is, how
Yeah.
can tech help us with that struggle?
Okay, I'm so glad that you brought this up because I think you encountered the age-old problem, which is like you've got some Luddites that are like, well, let's just do calendars and send them to
Yeah,
kids, and you're going, kids have iPads, like,
right,
and you're trying to convince your president who's in his 70s or whatever, like, oh no, kids just don't want to come down to the arena and
right.
color, like they. But we're in the exact same problem in sports right now. Is you have two ages, for lack of a better term, like this is how we've always done it and this is what is new. And so what happens is you have a lot of people selling new. You need AI, you need analytics, you need this, you need data. Probably a guy sitting in a chair right now looking at a team, working with a bunch of athletes is going, just give me the
That's
data.
right.
Well, okay, one part of it is it useful data? What is it saying? And does it does it mean anything? So like what you have right now is like data houses of like all this data, and you're like, yeah, we got the data on this, and I'm like, is it operational? Does it make sense? And how does it actually contribute to the health, wellness, and also performance of your athletes? And that's where the big disconnect is, quite frankly, Pete, is
Yeah.
between people selling new technologies and data and look at all the things that we can do. And at the core of this is you still have human and human problems and human life and human relationships and human pressures and human
Yeah.
dynamics and personalities. AI cannot touch that human aspect of it. So the real problem is my mind, is there's no real clear roadmap for integration of technologies into a sports organization at a team
Hmm.
level and on an individual level. So what you have is a bunch of tactics, and I equate it to watering dead leaves of a tree.
Yeah.
It's like, let's just throw
Well,
water on the
yeah,
leaves and the
why
tree
not?
will
Right? Maybe
grow.
it'll come back to life. You never know.
Why not? But you're watering dead leaves. The tree's dead. So and so I think what you have, and this is unfortunate because of the capitalism in sport, is you have a lot of grifters selling a bunch of technologies, and you have a guy who's trying to make a decision, and there's no product roadmap, is what we'd say in technology. There's no product roadmap or formula that's healthy. Everyone's selling the latest and greatest thing, and quite frankly, I don't know if I can swear, but it's a bunch of BS.
You can swear. I I
Yeah,
I
okay.
I I I could
99%
not
vote
agree with you
yes.
more. And this isn't just only on kind of the tech side of things. It's on the business side and in hockey operations, which you kind of alluded to, like or football operations or baseball operations.
All of them.
There's almost this thing of paralysis by analysis, right? And there's
Yeah,
so much data and there's so
yeah.
many new the next big thing is coming along just
Ugh,
again like you said the next widget that somebody's trying to sell you, but who's
yeah.
really how are you using this data and how is it being
Yes.
implemented or activated across your different business points, whether it's how are
Yeah,
we making the players better, who's actually
yeah,
taking these numbers and walking down, and you see more of that on
yeah,
that side, right? Like strength and conditioning
yeah,
and whatever it might be on nutritional side, lots of data points coming in. Okay, now we have a business plan of action, but it doesn't happen that way all the time. And you're getting all this data and all
no,
this information. And again, kind of like for your career, you're getting all this information now, right? Like all of a sudden,
yeah,
I'm at a point in my life where I'm using technology, I'm using AI to put things together. But how am I using this in the right way for the right formula for
yeah.
me to be successful?
Yes, you just said it perfectly because I think, and this is why we do the work we do, because at the foundation of this is you have often young men and women, from an early age being groomed and
Right.
cultivated to become great athletes. You have jobs and careers riding on these young people. You have ownership groups and coaches who come with the specific ideologies and formatting and constructs. And then at the center of all this, you have all this technology. And so then you have, so that would be fine if you can conduct your business on an individual level. But then you have to consider what happens when these group comes together. And we
Hmm.
see this in sport is it's not a magic of an individual, it's about the right blend of the team, right? So do you have the right blend in the right spots with the right, we would say, emotional fitness, because that's the work we do. Is there the right blend of emotional fitness that blends this together, and then does the data inform the blend of that? And that is the one thing that AI can do well. And I think that this is the biggest misnomer, hence why we made Wilson, hence why I do what I do, hence why I'm such an advocate for this, is the fact that what AI does extremely well is pattern recognition that a human can't see. So where the AI needs to get to is not in data collection,
Yeah.
it's recognizing patterns. Specifically, this is why I love sports so much, and this is why I love working with athletes and performers so much, is because so much of this is in pattern recognition that a human can't detect. And that's where the magic of technology can be in. So if I was in charge of a team today and president of an organization, I'd say, give me the technology that does something that a human can't do and doesn't replace humans. So the real, I would say, like litmus test for every
Hmm.
technology is, does this replace humans? Then it's probably bullshit.
Yeah.
And then the second part of it is, if in the case of the technology, does it tell me something that a human just actually could not do? And that is where technology should be actually evaluated, is in the magic of
Yeah.
that. And so we deal with pattern recognition in real time across 4 quadrants of health. So physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. So we look at data and say, what does the data reveal in a pattern for an individual and on a team level that otherwise isn't obvious to the individual? That's informative.
Yeah, for sure.
And then the next part of the informative for that, for anybody of any organization, is saying, what decision do I need to make or adjustments do I need to make to the unit or to the team or to the structure that may change the pattern? And can that be predicted?
Uh-huh.
So if you take an AI, it could look at a combination of 3. And let's use the Blackhawks as a perfect example. We had Jonathan Taves, Patrick Kane, and let's use Marian Hossa,
Yeah.
right? So let's say the goalie. So let's just take
Three
those
good
3
guys.
guys,
You
right?
picked three good ones, Janice. That's pretty good. That's a Hall
Okay,
of
so
Fame
let's just
lineup. Yeah.
use. Okay, so there's these 3 guys. If I were to look at these 3 guys in real time across their full day, across 4 quadrants of health, and I were to then analyze and do the pattern recognition of what happened in real time game sports over a series of games, could I take that data set modeled with real life
There you
games,
go.
and
Yeah.
then see a pattern, and then say, if Marian Hossa actually had McDonald's cheeseburgers on these days, he performed better. And he thought that he needed to have a vegan diet that day, but actually he did better on the McDonald's days. And if you revealed that in combination with the others, does that tell you something more informative?
It does. It does. And how could we use that for Marian Hossa as he now enters into his next, and he's in his next phase? So
So good that you
zone in
asked me
on
that.
that for me a little bit, and tell me how the science and the technology and the AI are going to help somebody who is now a little bit lost in everything that they once
Yeah.
knew, who they were, all the structure that they used to have, all the guidance, coaching, that's all gone. So now what do
Yes.
I do?
I'm so
Who am
glad
I
you
and where
asked
do
me
I
this.
go?
I'm so glad you asked me this because, so
It's
we do
almost like
emotional
we set
fitness.
this up, but we didn't.
I know, because I'm so glad you actually haven't asked me this question before. Um, so the really interesting thing about emotional fitness is there you have within yourself a container of optimization that is underutilized. You probably don't even know you have it. You've never thought about your emotional system like you see your physical system. Emotional fitness is not mental health. Emotional fitness is essentially your inner radar for everything in your life you want to be able to do. It enters the emotional system, then it goes to the head. Now, here is the problem. When these athletes are growing up, they have conditioned themselves, behavior conditioned from a psychological perspective, to attach a feeling to an outcome outside of
Yeah.
themselves. I'm good at hockey. Therefore, this feeling of joy that I have and performance that I have, I'm going to give this feeling to the sport itself, or the winning, or the accolades, or the fame, or the money, right? So they've taken a feeling and they've attached it to something outside of the self and
Absolutely.
said, this is the reason why I have this
Yep.
identity. What we do in emotional fitness is we reverse model that. We say at the core of the emotional center is a feeling that you want to create. Let's just say that you want to be great. I'll just use that as an example. You have a feeling within yourself that you want to be great. There's no time limit on your quote unquote greatness. So if you think about Michael Jordan, he gives us the best example of someone who's taken something born to him that he wanted to be, and he's placed it in different avenues. So, like, for example, Jordan, when you listen to him, he'll say, I just wanted to be great, period. And the first place that he exercised it out was in the game of basketball. So he took the game of basketball and he said, my core belief of who I am is I just want to be great. I want to be the best and I want to be great. And the first avenue that I've exercised it out happened to be basketball. But as he reached the peak of that, you notice he started to pivot. He tried baseball. But now, if you actually look at him, he is always exercising that inner emotional muscle out in different venues. He's exercised it out in business and in NASCAR. So he's still core. It's not, he didn't attach his greatness just to basketball. What he believed about himself was that he just wanted to exercise greatness, period. And he wanted to do it in different ways and in different avenues. Now, the problem with athletes today, and this is what's different, is we've attached the greatness to the event itself, to the actual outcomes, to this sport, as though it's the only thing and the final thing. And there's so much more money about it now, and it's all capitalism and score. Like, but when you actually look at Jordan of the 90s, it was about being great and winning. And he wanted the right formula of winning. He did not give two
So true.
craps, although he did have the money. He wanted the right formula. And you notice he was always
Yeah.
like a scientist. Like he had Rodman and Kerr for a little while, and then he had Pippen and Kerr. And
Yeah. Always helping
he was
moving the right
literally
parts around with the team. Yeah.
he played
Absolutely.
chess. And so what athletes, and it's unfortunate because we've conditioned athletes to be very myopic and very narrow in their focus of their gifts and talents. It's like your gifts and talents are only here. And so that narrow focus and the pressure of that means that their landscape to exercise this emotional power out,
Yeah.
and it's an emotional power, has been completely narrowed in its vision. And so, what we do with Wilson is we want to take an athlete and say, at its core, what did you really love? Like, if I took Jonathan Taves, and although he wanted to be great, what was his core power? Was it being a distributor? Was it about being a contributor? Was it about passing? Like, did he really find the most joy, the squeeze of the juice, out of being the guy that made all of this happen? So, if I were to take the essence of Jonathan Taves out of hockey, where else could he place that exact same formula in other avenues of his life? And this is the work of emotional fitness. And this is really the true
Yes,
pivot.
it is.
And this is why I talk about Jordan. Is if you say Jordan, I watched an interview and someone said, "Do you still shoot a basketball?" He's like, "No, like how busy? That's done for him. He reached whatever the conclusion of that is." Now, this is the other part of emotional fitness that's difficult for athletes, is that if you don't win, you haven't exercised the greatness out. So if I take Connor McDavid as a classic example of this, if Connor McDavid never wins a cup, if he never wins the
Which
cup,
might happen.
which might happen if he stays in Edmonton any longer, but that's another story. He stays there. Is he ever Gretzky? And so the thing that we say is he's not Gretzky because he doesn't win. So what happens in the psychology for a Connor McDavid is his greatness and his exercise of greatness is relying upon an external event that he can't control. And so what happens in behavior conditioning and psychology with these athletes is we've conditioned them so much because of ownership and coaches and parents, and that we have to condition athletes out of that. And we need to get to the core in their emotional fitness and says, what are you really great at? Like, what is your true superpower? Because your true superpower isn't playing hockey. Your true superpower is what you become in the exercise of that. It is one tapestry of potentially thousands.
Amazing. So that sounds amazing in theory, right? Like in what you're saying almost from a scientific standpoint. How would it work in the real world? How does this information come to somebody who is saying? Because I think it's really important what you're saying, especially for anybody in a pivot in their life, and especially professional athletes who find themselves at the end of the road or getting to the end of the road, where what you say is just so crucial about that myopic view into the event, right? Like everything is around the event, and that's who I am, and that's what I'm defined by. But it's just not true. And so the theory, what you're saying, I think any athlete who just heard what you said was like, oh my God, yeah, she's like dead on. That is so true. How does Wilson, and how does this on a day-to-day basis, how do I figure this out? Where do I get the roadmap to move forward?
I'm so glad you asked me that. So first, in emotional fitness, I designed a process. So first I wrote a theory, and then I had to design a process that could extract those, what I would say, clues and gifts out, so we could put a different puzzle together. But at the core of a human being is what we would call the emotional system. You can think about the emotional system like your heart and your lungs. It just operates. Everyone has one. But in human beings, everyone's emotional system is suboptimal. And we have sub-optimized it for the sake of being mentally tough or stronger here or think better, think for there if I am. And we've ignored the emotional system. It would be like going to jog for the first time and thinking you could run 20 miles and saying, why don't my lungs work?
I think it's Yog. I think the J is silent, I think, but I'm not sure. I think it's Yog. But I believe it's
so if you think about that,
I don't know. I can't do it anymore. So anyway, go ahead.
So if I were to introduce to you yoga, you would start with the fundamental practices of yoga, and then eventually maybe you touch your toes. Not you, Pete, but everybody else could eventually like touch your toes, and then you get the foundation. Emotional fitness is like that. We teach you the foundation of your emotional fitness system so that you can understand what is in it, as well as also for you to optimize it and work with it. And that becomes a daily practice of what we call emotional fitness. And what happens in the practice of emotional fitness is it reveals the true gift. So it reveals the true skill set, the true passion outside of the tapestry of the canvas. So if you were to ask a painter and you were to say to a painter, like, what do you love to do? It's like, I love to paint. And you said, oh, what did I paint? Well, I painted this canvas. And it'd be like, oh, that's it. He'd say, no, I paint here, I paint here, I paint here, I
Right.
paint here. But athletes only know the canvas, not that they are painters. And so what
Interesting.
we do is we teach them how to be the painter
Yes.
in different canvases, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. And so athletes are taught that the canvas is the gift, the show, the final, the tournament, the playing, the sport is the gift. No, they're painters. And you don't paint one canvas.
And obviously this applies across, verticals of different careers, right? I mean, it's not, you're making a
Everything.
very salient point on athletes that is dead on, but I mean, you can think of thousands of other examples for everyday,
Yes.
other careers, whether you're in
Yes.
finance or whatever, right?
Everything.
Like it's the same.
Yes. It's the same. And this is what I love about emotional fitness so much, Pete, because even look at you. Like when I first met you,
Don't.
I'm going to use you as an example. You have this extraordinary larger than life presence. Everyone would look at you and say, well, he's got the best job in the world. He's working for the Blackhawks. Like, look at the marketing, look at the people,
Yeah.
look at the stuff, like, look at his ability. I remember you taking me to, was it Gibson's or Gibby's or some
Right.
kind of
Yeah, we
Italian
did dinner.
steak
That's right.
down there. And I was like, he's either a good fella and he's shaking everyone's hands because everyone in
I
the
was a
place
made
is like,
man. You thought I was a made man. That's
I
unbelievable.
was like, everyone in Chicago. Well,
Someone's
I'm with this young
faster. They're gonna
Canadian.
get whacked if they don't do
I've
what
been
I
to
say.
Chicago one other time. You're taking me to this like corners and all of a sudden we go into the restaurant and everyone's like, Pete, Pete, Pete. We could not make it to the table without you stopping to talk to everybody. Like everyone was wanting to shake your hand. You had, I marveled at it,
One
Pete. I really
crawfish, I
did.
guess. Yeah.
I was like, wow, why is this guy only at the Blackhawks? That's what I thought. So I was like, and I literally was like, Janice, this is like a great career. Like, don't minimize this guy. But I was like, this guy's like, everyone loves him. I love him.
I'm all
He's so
for it.
nice. I said he remembers everything. So if I take you as the classic example, you had your first exercise of that talent and skills and abilities at the Blackhawks. We can love and bless it. But you're taking the extracting the gifts out of it and now you're applying it into different avenues. And the hardest part for people to understand is that emotional fitness is the process that allows you to extract the gift and to make that
Sure.
happen. If you try to do the same thing you've done before,
Yeah.
you will get the same
Yeah.
result. This is the definition of insanity. So if you went and tried to apply at another organization, doing the same job that you did before, what you would probably find very quickly, which being your friend, I now know happened, you want to put pins in your effing
That
eyes.
is 100% correct.
And you would go, God, get me, this is
Yeah.
soulless. Like, why am I here? And so what people then draw to them is actually conflict because they think that it's the job that gave the gift or the thing, but it's
It's
not.
not. And
It's
within
not.
that, there is a finding of reinvention and purpose, right? And
Yes.
I think that for, again, people like me who did not play professional sports, but even for athletes too, that can be scary at first, right? Like what you just said happened to me, like that absolutely, and you kind of like, well, wait a minute, that's who I am, that's my identity. The staff here were just talking about that. And when that is taken away, you have to
Yeah.
pause for a second and say, oh, yeah, what is this reinvention process going to look like? And then what is my
Yes.
purpose coming out of it? What am I going to do?
Yes.
So
And this is what I
tie
yeah,
that
it's
to
so
emotional
important to do
fitness
that.
for us.
Yeah, so you need to think about emotional fitness as like a radar system. Like if you were to go on a boat with a broken compass,
Oh, I love
you
your
may go in
analogies.
circles.
You have the best analogies of all time. They're incredible. Keep going. A
Okay,
boat
but
without a
if
compass.
you were to go on a sailboat, you need a compass. And the compass is going to say, I want to go this way, and the compass is going to go this way. Now, if that compass is broken, the boat goes in circles. So if it goes in circles, and you can ask people even they get lost in the wilderness, they're like, did I walk in a circle? Habitually, you'll keep doing the same thing. You'll go in a circle. So you need to think about emotional fitness as your inner compass that is injured. So it is injured from a
Mm.
biological, emotional, mental capacity. It is an injury that 99.9% of the world has no idea that they have an injured emotional compass, a system.
Wow.
Now, what that really does is it takes in sensory around you like a sponge, and then it travels the elevator to the head, and then you make decisions. Now, if the compass is injured, the signals that fire to the brain to say, do this, do that, do this, it's not the right signal.
Right.
You're getting a misfire. So, emotional fitness is we have to heal that system that could be overutilized, underutilized, vacant, injured,
Mhm.
broken, because when you've been an athlete or conditioned in a sport, like the famous saying, there's no crying in baseball. Now, emotion isn't crying. It's a radar system. Emotional fitness is a radar system. This we're not talking about
Yeah, I'm glad you said
feelings.
that because I think there's often confusion what emotional fitness. Like, hear emotion, you're
No,
like, oh, that's an emotional person. They're
no.
sensitive. And when you say emotional to a professional athlete, they probably bristle a little bit,
Yeah,
like,
they
wait,
do.
whoa. I'm tough.
Yeah,
I've been through a lot. I don't have emotional
yeah.
problems, but there is a difference.
There's a difference. And I always I use Jordan as a good example. Like when Jordan went to the hoop and it looked like he jumped in air again after he jumped already
Yeah.
once, that's emotional fitness. It's the air above. And so
Mm.
oftentimes when you see an athlete, they'll tell you something like, I got into the zone and I didn't, that's emotional fitness. It's actually emotional. You felt your way through that. You made intuitive, so athletes are highly emotional
Yeah.
creatures. In fact, they do a lot of things through their feeling body that they don't even know that they do. And so when we're talking about emotional fitness, we're talking about optimizing an emotional system that is your compass and your radar. It is injured and underdeveloped. So if I go back
Yeah.
to the Connor McDavid
Hmm.
example,
Yeah, please.
I'll go back to this example. So Connor McDavid, how they train athletes now is they do something where they isolate greatness. They shelter them. They maybe have them, live with other people. They don't
Yeah.
want they want them laser focused, right?
Hmm.
They don't want them to see anything else. And they think if they protect this individual from anything outside themselves, this individual will perform optimally. And I call this isolated greatness. When you isolate greatness, they have a very underutilized emotional radar system because the radar system gets better by friction. It's like
Wow.
doing a squat.
Hmm.
You don't get a good ass if you don't get your ass down, and the first time you do a squat, you hate it, but it gets better because you have to exercise that muscle. When you isolate athletes and set them apart from teammates, the integration process back to that, just like when an athlete finishes, their integration back to that, because they've been isolated and set apart,
Yeah.
they have an underperformed,
Makes
underutilized
sense.
emotional
That makes
system.
sense.
They don't trust
Hmm.
themselves. They don't trust others because their world has been, again, very
And it's
myopic.
so crucial in hockey and every sport to have to not have that.
Yeah, you weren't worried about them being injured because we didn't have a thing called franchise players. The hockey guys I grew up in Saskatchewan in Canada played baseball. We were softball girls. The softball girls played ringette and hockey. Softball girls, the guys played hockey. We all played baseball.
Yep.
And we were all farting around. Basketball guys played baseball. That's why Jordan actually knew about baseball because in the off season, you
Yeah.
actually played baseball.
Hmm.
And so what you had was actually a very sort of healthy emotional fitness because it wasn't so myopic. Now you have kids playing 12 months a year, you've got academies, you've got this isolated, you're picking out
Yeah.
kids. Now technology is dangerous because the AI is going to pick out kids that are showing the pattern of greatness
Right.
and they're going to NIL them earlier and hook them earlier. And what you're going to have is a shitstorm of underutilized emotional systems. And some of the best players work on the farm in the off season.
Hmm.
Gordie Howe worked on the farm. Like a lot of people that had exposure to other things became great and could play with the freedom because their emotional system was actually utilized. And it's utilized with friction, it's utilized with relationships, it's utilized being in the wild, for lack of a better term. You are the boat at sea, you need that compass.
Brought it all back
If you
together to the compass. I think that's dead on.
Mhm.
Tell me a little bit about. I know we're working on a project called the Athlete Optimization Collective, and I'd be
Yeah,
remiss if I didn't bring this up because taking Wilson and all the technology and the emotional wellness, emotional fitness tools, but where do you start? Where does somebody start with this? How do you
right.
start? And
Yeah,
especially again, an athlete or an executive who is most likely a type A personality. Where okay, how
yeah,
I do need help, but where do I go? How do I start? What is the Athlete Optimization Collective? Talk to the audience about
yeah.
that a little bit and
Well,
where that's
I'm
going to
really
come in
excited
helpful.
about it. Because so the Athlete Optimization Collective is first, really first and foremost, we're going to introduce emotional fitness to the world, to say, just like you understand physical fitness, emotional system has its own exercise, it has its own science. Just like physical fitness is garbage in, garbage out, and you need to move. That's the basis of the science. Emotional fitness has its own science. These are the two emotional injuries. This is how your emotional system works. This is what it looks like when it's underperforming. This is what it looks like when it's in optimization. So the athlete collective first allows us to do that. The second thing is the science of emotional fitness is its 4 quadrant health: physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. And what that means is that you absorb emotional pain throughout your whole life, unbeknownst to you. You could have family dynamics where you've shut down, but it doesn't mean just because you're mentally tough that you haven't still absorbed emotional pain in your life. What happens over a period of time, and particularly through transition periods, so athletes quitting, is you need to think about those like ticking time bombs:
Ah,
emotional pain that you have repressed and
yep,
ignored in your mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual life. They start to bomb. And so, what Wilson does is not only predict when that will happen, it also can help mitigate it and also train your emotional system for optimization. And so, what Wilson does is it looks at everything that someone is doing in real time in a day. So, we're going to take 30 athletes, look at everything that they're doing in a day. They are going to be our guinea pigs of emotional fitness. We are going to throw physical attributes at them: physical fitness, different technologies and mental. How do we wire the brain differently? Because if you imagine an athlete has been wired one specific
right.
way, we need to rewire them back to what is true. And so what Wilson does is it does the analytics in real time, but at the same time we're also introducing other wellness innovations that could be really helpful, like red light therapy, or is ayahuasca even a thing? How about microdosing? Does that even work? And so, what we're able to do with these athletes is have a working prototype model for Wilson, but also have a little bit of fun, because we have what's called the Emotional Fitness Index. It's a scoring system.
Right.
How
Yeah.
fit are you across all quadrants of health? So, you'll get a physical score, a mental score, emotional, and spiritual. When you put all of that score together, you have what's called an EFI index. And so we thought it'd be fun to have the NHLers compete with the former NFLers and the NFLers with the Major League Baseballers. And then they have a collective score that we could
Well,
actually have a little bit of a
competition's
competition.
always good. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what the athlete collective is. But on a larger, bigger picture, it's really going to say is this is how we can transition for anybody, not just athletes.
That's what I was going to
You
ask.
have everyone has a transition inflection point in their life. I'm perimenopausal, I'm going through one. I'm divorced, going through another one. Everyone goes through these different transition points. And what happens in transition is emotional pain erupts in the
Mm,
body. And what we're saying is that there's a healthy way to do this that's not just looking at what's my life financially after sports. It's saying, what do I look like as a physical body? What do
right.
my
Right.
relationships look like? What's my emotional fitness? What about those injuries? What about those concussions you ignored and you didn't tell medical staff when you got your bell rung? Like, how do those show up? How do I transition? And as you've said all the time from the beginning, Pete, is like, who am I after this?
Yep.
It's the identity. That's the real pivot. It's the real pivot is this was one part of who I am, but now I'm here. What does that look like?
I'm interested. You said rewiring, and we're talking about athletes, but also, if there's business executives, just the regular people who stumbled across the podcast who are like, I'm not an athlete. I'm not going to get into the athlete optimization collective. Are there things that you know of out there, Janice, that these people can look to today? Like,
Yeah.
what
Yeah,
can I
they
go
can come
to
right
that
to
that
us.
I can espouse to what Janice is speaking here?
Yeah.
I believe everything she's saying. She's
Yeah.
dead on. What tools do I have?
Yeah, so I would they should go to wilson4q.com. So I have emotional fitness coaches they can work with. There's a program that you can follow by yourself or with a coach, and it's no different than hiring a personal trainer. You need to think about emotional fitness just like you were like, "Hey, I want to get in shape. I want to run a marathon. I'm going to hire a guy or a girl that's going to teach me how to run." We teach you how to run in emotional fitness, and then you're on your way. You don't need us anymore. After 6 months, you don't need us. You really need 6 months to heal the emotional fitness system, and it takes that long just to perfect it and optimize it. But then after that, like, you're on your own. No different again. Like, once you learn physical fitness, it can be with you for life. Like, we travel now at our age. It's
Great
like, oh,
point.
does it have a
Yep.
gym in the hotel? Can I do free weights? Like, those are the things that people look to now. And in the physical fitness world, we've got so many
Right.
innovations. What we're here to do with emotional fitness is to make that just as an art and a
Yeah.
practice daily,
Bring more
just
Nautilus
like physical.
equipment into
Yes.
yes,
I
more
said I
Nautilus.
need a treadmill
That's
for my
right. Yeah, yeah.
feelings. Just,
We need a
like,
cold tub for the emotional fitness. That's what we need.
yeah, and cold tub actually works extremely well. So so there is, but what Wilson will do from a technology perspective is humans are pattern
Hmm.
machines. We are pattern machines. What we think and what we actually are often two different things. And what we think is good for us in our pattern or in our habits can hinder us, or we outgrow them. And so, what AI can do extremely well and should only be utilized for, in my personal opinion, is for the pattern recognition that humans cannot do.
Yeah.
You can't take your physical trainer with you 365, 24 hours a day. He can't look at all of you, even if he was there, he still couldn't see all your patterns. And it's the patterns you need to see. And it's when you see them, you can then adjust and change them. But if you don't even know what they are, you're
Yeah.
walking in a boat without a compass.
We've talked a little bit about the transition. It probably gives people a thought of older, more retiring, veteran, experienced athletes. You did touch a little bit on like some current guys who used some examples like Connor McDavid. What about even younger? Like, what about 14, 15, 16, 17, college age?
Oh my
How
God.
much is too much? You talked a little bit about, I totally agree with you on, again, the myopic view of just one sport, 12 months a year. But what is it what are the tools that you can start to bring, and where can Wilson
Yeah.
and others help from that younger age
Oh
and the
my
next
God.
generation?
The next generation in the younger age, the earlier that Wilson is introduced and emotional fitness is introduced, is the same thing that when physical fitness was introduced to us. Like, it blew our minds that we should have gym class, and
Yeah.
people think that's funny, but like, food labels didn't exist. Now you can't buy food without a food label, right? And so you need to think about emotional fitness in the exact same way. Is first we have to introduce this from an exercise and from a category of wellness perspective, from a science perspective. And the earlier you start, it changes the entire trajectory for someone who's young,
Sure. Yeah.
which means it not only changes their appearance, it changes the athlete could actually be even better. You may miss greatness without emotional fitness. So this is what it's not just for the athletes that are great that you think are great. It's also for all of the ones that you don't recognize, those diamonds in the
Exactly.
rough.
Yes.
And so those ones are underappreciated, underrecognized, and underutilized. The other thing is that, and we hear from a lot of youth coaches today, the team dynamics amongst young athletes today is utterly broken. the emotional pain amongst them all, the selfishness, the conditioning,
Yeah.
it's me, needing to
Right.
have the success without the goal, the process, the lack of discipline, not being coaches, people not being able to discipline kids because you hurt their feelings, the enablement, the victimhood, all of that is at an absolute peak explosion right now. And so we need to get into schools with youth to introduce emotional fitness, because not only does it eliminate 90% of the issues, and this is the one thing that's really core to what we do at Emotional Fitness, is right now young people are diagnosed most frequently in the United States and in Canada with ADHD. You can talk to every other kid, and every other kid has ADHD. And they have ADHD, anxiety, and depression. Those are the big
Yeah.
three that are getting diagnosed as young as 5, 6 years old. Anxious children at 5, 6 years old, and then they're getting medicated. Now, there is a place in the world for true medication for true conditions that are ADHD. I'm not saying they don't exist, but they do not exist as widespread as they are right now.
Mm.
And so, what you have is a zero tolerance for anything that's uncomfortable.
That
Anything that
makes
is
sense.
uncomfortable,
That
and I
makes
come
sense.
back to the squat. Anything that is uncomfortable must be a condition. Squats are uncomfortable. They're uncomfortable. Wall
Sure are.
squats particularly suck.
Painful.
They're very
Painful at times. Yes.
uncomfortable, painful. Are they a tried and true exercise? Is a
They work.
wall squat still being
They
utilized?
work.
Now, what's happening in this sort of young people's world is we have symptoms. Symptoms are not diagnosis and conditions always.
Uh-huh.
So, what we have is symptoms that look like ADHD or anxiety or depression. And what we say from a symptom perspective is that this is emotional pain first.
Mm-hmm.
Heal the emotional pain, then decide, do they still have true ADHD? Because their compass is broken.
We're skipping a crucial part.
Yes, yes, we're skipping it entirely,
Yes.
Pete.
Yeah.
And I have worked with a lot of young people in my practice when I don't do it anymore, the one-on-one
Yeah.
work. But I met a college team of 18 to 24-year-old boys. And I want to say 90% of them told me they had ADHD, they were medicated, and smoked pot on the regular. They used porn, they were on social media, they barely slept, they gained, they had anxiety, half of them diagnosed, so they were on a medication for that.
Wow.
And they had depression. And I looked at these young men and I said, the reason why is that their radar, now imagine that compass that's trying to take an emotional signal. It's going through that shitstorm of Adderall and
Oh, yeah.
anti-anxiety medication and this and and
Numbing. It's
social media.
numbing everything.
So how do what you know? And then we say go out and perform. It's amazing to me that these kids are performing. It's
Yeah.
amazing to me that they are performing as high as they are. I watched a kid swinging a golf ball the other day as I was on the range, and I was like, he must have been 7 years old, and he's just nailing the driver. And I was like, wow. Like, I was like, it was unbelievable. Straight, like, 150 yards down the thing. I was like, wow, this kid, he's like, but we as parents, and I'm going to speak to parents about this because I am one, we have got to chill the fuck out. These kids are not like
You just went
we
from
have got to.
PG-13 to R, but that's okay.
I know, but like, I'm so sorry, but really, like, no,
I hear you.
We have to allow some uncomfortableness again.
That's an extremely good point. There's not enough of it. You're making a very, very valid point. I have a thought here. I just want to run it by you. The future. You have been somebody in my world that has always kind of come to me as a little bit of a 8-ball in your hand that you see around the corners. And I would love to know, what does Janice Taylor think is next? AI is kind of embedding itself. We've figured out where somewhat figured out the good and the evil within it. More to come there. But what are you seeing around the corner from tech, from anything that might be able to help anybody listening here that is in this process, this pivot period in their lives, or just in
Yeah.
general?
Well, I'd say on the technical side, the first thing that's going to happen in the future is large language models are going to go away and be a lot less important than small language models, because small language models don't need the computing power. They don't need to have as much data. They function just as well as an AI, and they don't require the data houses that knock out perfectly good farmland that we need to grow food on, and they don't take the resources from the planet in the same way. And so the future is what's called verticalized small language AI. So they're built very specifically for a use case. So if you took a mechanic, you still need a mechanic, you still need a human, but he could have a small language AI that could look at the patterns of the 1976 Chevys he's fixing and see if this problem showed up before and could it pinpoint and diagnose it faster for him, but he's still going to go and fix it. That is the future that I think we need to advocate for, is that technology should never replace humans, but it can work alongside us. Like, we like being able to do our online banking. That's a great innovation.
Yeah.
Still need humans. But if you think about the future of AI specifically, the way it is right now is not sustainable. In fact, most of the large language model AIs that are coming out in the world won't even be here in a year, 2 years' time. You're going to have two or three that are going to dominate the landscape, just like Google dominated search and Facebook dominated social media. You're going to have a couple large language models like probably Claude and OpenAI and maybe one other. Those are going to satisfy as large language models that are going to basically be high performing Google.
Yep.
Small language verticalized AI that works alongside human, there's a lot more really cool innovations there that don't harm the planet, but unfortunately no one's talking about them. We're not talking about them because we're in love with, like, Claude being, or ChatGPT to actually, write a paragraph for us. We still think the AI is cool. Eventually the AI has to become useful. And this is what I advocated to you. I said, eventually we're going to see that kids inside social media is a problem. You saw it, I saw it, the world didn't see it. And now we have phones being banned in schools, and now we have social. So sometimes we're ahead of the game, but mark my words on this one. If I was an investor, and if I was building a technology, if I was and I am a general user, I look to see if it is a small language AI or a large language AI. I ask that question, and your audience should be asking it too, because a large language AI ruins the planet and false answers and is not overly useful. Small language AI can work alongside you in your industry.
Well, I knew you wouldn't disappoint on that answer, and I knew you wouldn't disappoint throughout this entire episode. I can't thank you enough. You have really been tremendous insight into this, and I think a lot of inspiration for leaders, athletes, you name it, in performance, wellness, emotional fitness, long-term fulfillment, all of it. I think you're leading everybody right down the path to where they need to listen and see these things coming around the corner and utilize this technology in a way that's going to help them in the long run.
Thank you.
So thank you so
and
much.
As always, Pete, you are just as much ahead of the game as I am, because you were the first one that gave me the contract back then. And here you are now talking about the pivot of athletes in the transition that has to be had. And you've also been such an advocate for innovations that are smart, that make sense. And so I'm also equally as excited for you on your journey.
Well, I appreciate that. And I hope others who feel the same way, I hope they like and they subscribe and they share to this show, because you are going to find more guests like Janice who are incredible. Janice, thank you so much. We will talk to you soon. Enjoy your cross-country trip in Canada.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.